Today is an interesting Sunday, I think. I hope it's interesting to you, but I think it's interesting because we have been in this series looking at the last week of Jesus for a while now, and we're on Palm Sunday, but I won't be speaking about Palm Sunday, okay? So all that I'm really going to be talking about for Palm Sunday is right now in the introduction, but I want us to think about that, okay? Because Palm Sunday is an amazing event in the life and ministry of Jesus. I can only imagine, and perhaps you can imagine with me, what it felt like for the disciples as they walked into Jerusalem that day and saw the response and the reception that Jesus got at this time. And you'll remember with me from the scriptures, and then a few weeks ago, Pastor Leslie taught us from this passage that when Jesus came in riding on this donkey, that the people greeted him with exuberant praise. They shouted, Hosanna. They shouted, He's here. We've waited for so long. And it's a beautiful thing, but I think it's interesting to consider that really the only person who was confident of what was going to happen that week was Jesus. And can you imagine the conflict that he had as he hears this praise that he rightly deserved from the lips of some of the people who just a few short days later would be screaming, "Crucify him," as Agnes shared with us and reminded us today during the welcome. The same lips that screamed, "Hosanna," were the lips that screamed, "Crucify him." And so, as we think through the events in Jesus' last week before the crucifixion, before the resurrection, I think that Jesus faced many battles. Sometimes when we read the Gospels, we can get to the temptation in the wilderness, and we can think, okay, this is where Jesus conquered the battle for temptation, right? And yes, he did. That's a wonderful thing. But his temptations didn't stop there, right? Right? Was Jesus ever tempted outside of the wilderness? I don't think this is a trick question. Yes, he was. You're right. He was. He was tempted, as the passage in Hebrews says, in every way that we are. Now, not the exact circumstance. Some of us are tempted to waste time on YouTube or Instagram, right? I don't think Jesus was tempted to waste time on Instagram, but he was tempted to waste time, right? He was tempted to ignore some things that he should be doing and instead do something that was mindless that he wanted to do, right? Perhaps our temptations involve other things that are modern technological advances. That's not saying Jesus was tempted in those specific things, but in those realms. Every temptation has a category, and Jesus was tempted in every category that we are. One of the temptations Jesus faced, I believe, was allowing this praise that came to him on Palm Sunday to derail him from his mission. They're already shouting Hosanna. They're already clamoring for me. Maybe I don't have to go to the cross. Now, I recognize, please, before you send me angry emails, that's conjecture on my part. I'm not telling you that it says that in Scripture. But I know from my own heart, sometimes the biggest temptations come from praise. But today, our passage is going to be in Mark chapter 14. Mark chapter 14, starting in verse 26, is the scene in Gethsemane. And we have been blessed in the Bible with 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and very few things are recorded in every Gospel. There are a good number of things that are recorded in 3 of the 4, but few things are recorded in all 4. The Garden of Gethsemane is one of those things. And if it's recorded in all four Gospels, we would be wise to take note of the importance, the reason that we should pay attention to it perhaps a little bit more intently is because we're told about this from four different angles, from all four Gospel writers. So I'm going to read this. I know it's a lengthy passage, but we're going to read. I'm going to read for you the scene in Matthew chapter 14, starting in verse 26, and it goes like this. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Now remember, the scene right before this is the Last Supper, okay? So following the events of the Last Supper, that's what this takes place. Verse 27, and Jesus said to them, you will all fall away, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee. Peter said to him, even though they all fall away, I will not. And Jesus said to him, truly I tell you, this very night, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. But he said emphatically, if I must die with you, I will not deny you. And they all said the same. And they went to a place called Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, sit here while I pray. And he took with him Peter and James and John and began to be greatly distressed and troubled. And he, Jesus, said to them, my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch. And going a little farther, he fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me. Yet not what I will, but what you will. And he came and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, Simon, are you asleep? Could you not watch 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. And again he went away and prayed, saying the same words. And again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to answer him. And he came a third time and said to them, are you still sleeping and taking your rest? It is enough. The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. And immediately, while he was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with him a crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, the one I will kiss is the man. Seize him and lead him away under guard. And when he came, he went up to him at once and said, Rabbi. And he kissed him. And they laid hands on him and seized him. But one of those who stood by drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. And Jesus said to them, have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to capture me? Day after day I was with you in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me. But let the scriptures be fulfilled. And they all left him and fled. I recognize that's a large passage, and some of you may be worried that I'm going to try and preach on that whole large passage, but I promise I'll try and let you out before lunch is cold, okay? Last year, I was looking through my notes, and last year I had the privilege of speaking on Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. And I felt led at that time to talk to you about how I believe that the Garden of Gethsemane is a beautiful passage that helps us to see Jesus' humanity and his divinity all at once. I think there are some scenes in the Gospels where we're able to see that amazing truth displayed in some amazing ways. And I think the Garden of Gethsemane is one of those for sure. And today, it's interesting, sort of like a springboard from that. Today, we're going to be focusing on Jesus' humanity, okay? And as we think about this, I would like us to think about the fact that the agony of Gethsemane involves Jesus being wounded, okay? Now, agony is an interesting word. Agony is a word that we don't often use, right? Did anybody used agony in the last week? No? I don't think we throw it around very, very quickly. It's one of the few words I think we're cautious in using because we recognize its meaning, right? Sometimes we abuse a word so often that it doesn't mean anything. Like when I was a kid, we used awesome for everything. Wow, the Grand Canyon's awesome. Wow, this relish is awesome. Wow, that TV show is awesome. And it just doesn't mean anything at a certain point. If everything is awesome, nothing is, right? And agony is a word that I think we've been cautious to use because of its meaning. Agony means excruciatingly painful, physically or emotionally or psychologically. And as we read the gospel accounts of the Garden of Gethsemane, agony is an appropriate title for what Jesus is experiencing here. He is going through extreme, excruciating pain. And I think he's going through this pain because he's wounded in a few specific ways. The first way that I would like us to talk about is that he is abandoned by loved ones. Now, I'm talking to a room of people, and I recognize that some of these wounds are probably going to feel very personal and real for you. Some of these wounds feel very personal and real for me. But one of the beauties of that is we're going to be talking about how Jesus goes through these wounds and seeks to lead us to go through these wounds. So if you're sitting here and hear me say that one of the wounds Jesus experiences is abandonment by loved ones, and that hurts, that sends a pain into you, please understand, my hope is that we don't leave this room despondent about it. My hope is that we leave this room hopeful about what may happen and how God may bring us through it. Jesus is abandoned by loved ones, okay? So first off, we need to understand abandonment implies loved ones, right? We don't feel abandoned when people we don't like leave us, right? We feel relieved, right? Now, we're not supposed to say that there's anybody that we don't care for, right? Especially not somebody that's talking at the front of the church, right? So I'm just talking about you right now, not me. No, so we don't feel abandoned when people we don't care for leave us. We feel relieved. We feel hooray. We feel excited. But when someone we care about leaves us, that's when we feel abandoned. Sometimes we feel abandoned because we're truly left behind. People choose to leave us. Sometimes we feel abandoned because we think they've said that. Have you ever felt like you're abandoned, but you weren't truly? Yeah? That's happened to me before. Have you ever felt abandoned and you were? Yeah. How was Jesus abandoned by loved ones? In verse 27, it says, Jesus said to them, the disciples, "You will all fall away, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered." There was a prophecy in this. Jesus knew it was coming. That's one of the things I think is most amazing about this. Everything Jesus experienced, all the wounds, all the excruciating pain, he knew it was coming and he still walked into it. We get blindsided most often, right? We out of nowhere. We don't have that time to think about it. And sometimes if we know it's coming, it's worse, right? Those few seconds before the dental drill comes in, sometimes that's worse than when the drill makes contact, right? Like, oh, what is about to happen? Jesus knew it was coming, and he walks into it. Verse 50 says, and they all left him. Now, when we read it, we might think, oh, this is the guards. This is the people that came to get him. But no, The people that left him are the people that were supposed to be with him. They had said, we're going to leave everything and follow you, Jesus. And they left him. They left him behind. He was abandoned. It might be easy for us to dismiss that quickly and say, well, Jesus. He's Jesus, right? Don't we think that sometimes? Jesus didn't really have to deal with abandonment issues because he's Jesus, right? Jesus didn't really have to deal with temptation because he's Jesus. That's wrong. If Jesus wasn't able to fall to it, he wasn't really tempted by it. The reason we can sing praises to this great high priest is because he was tempted in every way as I am, yet remained without sin. And when I am abandoned by loved ones, I'm tempted in all sorts of ways. I'm tempted to be hateful. I'm tempted to be holding on to a grudge. I'm tempted to lash out. I'm tempted to sink into depression. I'm tempted to do all kinds of things. And Jesus was tempted, yet remained without sin. He was also dismissed. I hope that it is a reality in my life that God has blessed me to be able to communicate. I believe it's a reality that God has shown me as I've grown. I think I've gotten able to grow in my skill at that. But one of the difficulties in being able to communicate is you're able to communicate, even when you don't want to. So some people can hide it when they're upset, or when they're frustrated, or when they're depressed, or when they're this and that. And I don't really have that gift. If I'm frustrated, people know it, and my words go. My words fly. And sometimes pain can be caused with quick words. Sometimes pain can be caused with ignoring what people say. Jesus here, and as I've been preparing for this, this is the part that I think I've been pondering the most. Jesus says this, all right? He brings Peter and James and John, and at this point, he's talking to everybody. He says, Peter, you're all going to fall away. And Peter, poor Peter, even if everybody falls away, I'm not. I'll be with you. You'll have one of your disciples, Jesus. If everybody runs away, I'll be with you. Peter, tonight you're going to deny me 3 times. This is the man that Peter has seen do countless miracles. He raised his mother-in-law from illness. He taught him how to fish, a professional fisherman. He had walked with him and seen Jesus do so much. Just recently, had seen him speak to a fig tree, and the fig tree dies. There's so many miracles that are recorded that we can point to, and so many things Jesus did that aren't recorded that Peter was a witness to. And Jesus says, tonight you're going to deny me 3 times. And Peter says, oh no, you've got it wrong, Jesus. He emphatically says, no, if I must die with you, I will. And then everybody feels that pressure. If Paul stands up and says, listen, I'm with BCF, I'm with it for the long haul, I'm here, then all of us sort of feel that pressure to go, yeah, me too, right? Like, well, I mean, whether we feel that way or not, we know what everybody's expecting, right? And Peter leads the way and says, oh no, if I have to die with you, I will. And everybody follows suit, right? Oh yeah. Those quick words completely dismissed what Jesus said. Jesus is sharing his heart. I'm about to have a really hard time right now because I'm going to be alone. People that I have spent my life with these past 3 years are about to leave me. And they didn't even give him the time of day. They just answered quickly. They dismissed him quickly with words. They dismissed him with inaction. After this, Jesus pulls his inner circle, Peter, James, and John, says, come with me. And he goes a little bit ways away, says, let's pray. But this is what he says. He took Peter and James and John and began to be greatly distressed and troubled, and says to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch." Please take a moment. I know most of us in this room have read this before. Every year that we've been around, at Palm Sunday time, maybe not Palm Sunday time, during the last week of Christ, before Easter, before Resurrection Day, we've all read this multiple times, right? But take a moment to think about what Jesus is saying here. This is the man that was so confident and at peace, he slept through a storm that seasoned fishermen thought they were going to die in. This is the man who had been multiple times approached by an angry mob threatening to kill him, and he simply walked through them. This is the man who had dealt with so much open hostility that the people were amazed. This Jesus, the same Jesus, says, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death." He shares with his closest friends, "I am hurting right now." He's open, he's vulnerable, he takes a chance. He goes to them and shares with them, "I am hurting right now." Is that the Jesus we often think about? If we played a game and put quotes from the Bible up and said, "Who said this?" and we had a quote that said, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death, remain here and watch," how many of us would have said Jesus is the one to say that? That sounds like a David quote to me. That's probably a David quote, right? Jonah. Maybe Jonah said that. "I'm sorrowful because the people are repenting," right? We're not attributing that to Jesus usually. "My soul is very sorrowful." Please understand, it's the same Jesus we've been reading about in the Gospels, the same miracle worker, the same confident man of God, miracle worker. And the disciples had lived through it all, and they hear this, and I venture that Jesus didn't throw this language around very often. And they hear him say, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death." And they fall asleep. If I came to you right now and said, "I'm having a really hard time, I'm struggling," you probably wouldn't fall asleep on me, right? Like, could you sit with me for an hour? How many of you think you could stay awake for an hour with me if I came to you and said, "Man, I'm really struggling," right? Maybe, the game was on really late last night, Jonathan. Listen. So, right. If I come to you at 11 tonight, yeah, I know Tim gets up and runs because never mind. He's a good, there's descriptions that come to my mind when I think about people that run for fun, and I should not say them out loud. So there you go. I don't run for fun. So, Jesus comes to them and says, "I'm sorrowful." How do the disciples hear this and not respond? Jesus came to them 3 times and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to answer him. Jesus was wounded because he was dismissed by the inaction of his friends. And he was wounded by betrayal. Earlier we said that abandonment implies that it's a loved one, right? We're not abandoned unless someone that we care about is the one that left. Betrayal implies the same thing. You're not betrayed by an enemy. You're betrayed by a friend. You're betrayed by a loved one. After Jesus is talking to the disciples that are sleeping, he says, "It's all right, it's enough. My betrayer's at hand." And immediately, Mark is big on showing us that the action was nonstop. He says, while he was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with him a crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. And the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I kiss is the man." Now for us that seems strange, but we have to understand this was the greeting of friends. This was the greeting of close, trusted loved ones. This was the greeting of people who were familiar with each other. He came and identified Jesus as the one that they were to take away by giving one of the most intimate greetings that he could. He betrayed him with a kiss. Jesus was wounded. And we serve a high priest that is like us. Sometimes we don't think about the fact that Jesus suffered in the same way that we suffer. Jesus was abandoned and betrayed and dismissed. And I left a blank there because you might think of one right now that you are wounded by. This is a way that you are hurting. And I want to tell you today, as we think and ponder on Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, that Jesus was wounded too. And Jesus is a leader. And He is stepping out and leading us to make a choice. Will we follow His example or will we not? When we're wounded, we have a choice. I don't have pearls for us. I don't have the budget for that. But I have a marble. And I would like us to think for a moment about what we know about oysters. I just had a brain. That's an oyster that does a pearl, right? Yeah. Wouldn't that have been awkward? Like, what do we know about clams? What do we know about oysters? What do you know about pearls, guys? You guys are smart. Tell me. Sand? How many of us think it's sand? Yeah? You're right. Good job. What happens is sand gets in where the oyster is. And that is an irritant, right? How many of us have been to the beach and know that sand is an irritant? The beach is my wife's happy place, and it is like the bane of my existence. And sand's a big reason for that, right? Sand is an irritant. And what happens is that the oyster has this sand, and in order to take care of the irritant, it starts to coat and to caress and to form this irritant to the point where it becomes a pearl. And sometimes when we're wounded, it always starts off as an irritant. But sometimes when we're wounded, it becomes something that we hold on to and we keep and we focus on and we put pressure on and we think about it and we dwell on it. And we make it a part of our core identity, and we just keep seeking to focus on that wound to the point where it becomes our precious. It becomes this piece of us that we hold on to and we want to keep, and it's ours. And that's a choice we can make when we're wounded. We can choose to do that. And I've got some folks that are going to be bringing around. I'd like everybody to take a marble. I mean, if you don't want to, I'm not going to make you. That's fine. It's okay. I'm inviting you to take a marble. And while they're passing it out, I would just like to tell you a story. I do not know the date. I've been searching the archives of my mind, trying to figure out what the date was. All I can tell you, it was June or July, and I was an early teenager. And I went to a church camp. And at that church camp, there was a speaker, and I don't remember his name. I don't remember what he said. All I remember is that one day he had marbles for us. And he said at the beginning of the week, this marble represents whatever it is that stands in the way of you growing in your relationship with God. And we're going to talk about that throughout the week. And I want to tell you that at that moment, I didn't have to think about it for a long time. At that moment that I got that marble, I knew exactly what it was. I knew what was standing in the way of me growing in my relationship with God. It couldn't have been any more clear than if God Himself had spoken audibly to me. I did not hear an audible voice, but I felt the leading, and I felt the guidance, and I felt the identification. And I remember we were challenged to have that marble with us all week, and just to think about what it was that was standing in our way. And I think often it can be from a wound. In my life, it was a wound. In my life, this marble was the feeling of abandonment from someone that I felt like was supposed to be there for me. No matter what, they were supposed to be there, and they chose not to be. And that wound had been inflicted on me, and I had chosen, just like an oyster with that sand, to just make it a part of my life and a part of my identity. And I held it close, and I chose to build up barriers around it so that no one else could get to it and maybe repeat it, right? And I knew what that wound was. I knew it was abandonment from a particular individual. And all week I was challenged, what are you going to do with that? And this speaker said, I'm inviting you to give it up, to give God a chance with that barrier, with that wound, with whatever it is you're dealing with. And so today, as we think about Jesus being wounded, and we're not done, we're going to talk about how Jesus gets through these wounds, but as we think about what that wound may be, I want to give us some time to just reflect. And they're going to sing a song, and I'm inviting you to prayerfully consider, what wound are you carrying? What barrier have you built up? What's standing in the way of you having a more deep and thriving relationship with God? And after this song, we'll see perhaps what the Lord may have us do with it, okay? So take a few moments to pray. If you'd like to pray with somebody, I'm available. I see Pastor Leslie over here. I'm sure he'd pray with you. Greg's here. If you came with someone that you would like to ask them to pray with you, you can. And if you'd just like to have some time to just solo pray, that's fine.
Done, my God and Father.
Jesus was faithful. He was wounded, but he was faithful. He knew what was coming, but he was faithful. He was prepared because he remained faithful. The choice of the walk to the crucifixion began long before they handed him that beam of wood. He started walking toward the cross when he came to be born. He continued walking toward the cross when he resisted temptation. He continued walking toward the cross when he was not derailed by praise of people who weren't thinking through what they were saying. He continued walking toward the cross when he ignored the pain that comes from abandonment and dismissal from friends and betrayal. Not because it's not a wound, but because he considered what God was doing more valuable. Jesus was faithful, and he prayerfully followed God. Abba, Father, Dad, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me. Yet not what I will, but what you will. Sometimes we think a prayer is importance is shown because of the length, right? My grandpa used to say that he loved to ask me to say the blessing when family got together for meals because I would just pray and pray and pray. And he says I would pray for the doorknobs and for the dishes and for, I don't remember that, but, you know, he says that sometimes we think if you just pray a long time, it means something, right? The older I've gotten, the more convinced I've become that sometimes the most impacting prayers I have ever uttered have been short, quick, thought-filled, faith-filled, sincere prayers. Jesus prayed the same thing multiple times. He said, Lord, God, Dad, anything is possible. Is there any way to do this outside of what's about to happen? But I'll still go. I'll still go. See, the thing about a pearl, do you know what a pearl is worth when it's in an oyster at the bottom of the ocean? $1 million? This much. It's only valuable after it's handed over, after it's given up. Jesus was wounded, and instead of holding on to it and dwelling on it and keeping it to himself and making it the only thing he focused on, he gave it up. And his giving it up resulted in a way for us to come to relationship with God the Father, resulted in a way for us to receive salvation. Our giving up of whatever the wound it is that we've thought about, whatever the barrier is that we've thought about, may be the tool that God uses in the life of another. May be the tool that God uses in the life of a loved one. May be the tool that God uses in your life to allow your relationship with God to grow to the point where you've always wanted it to be. But it only becomes that when we give it up. And so I want you to know, if you all leave here with these marbles, that's fine. I'm okay with losing all my marbles. I didn't have many to begin with, so. But I would like to challenge you to consider giving God a chance to do what only God can do with the wound you have held on to for so long. See how he might take it. Years ago, when I was at that church camp, I knew exactly what the wound was. And by the end of that camp, I believe it was a Thursday night, I walked up and I put that marble in that jar. And I want to tell you right now, it was not an instantaneous fix. I did not go home and everything was better. But I can tell you standing right now in 2023, that for the past few years I've had a better relationship with that individual than I had my entire life. God has healed that relationship to the point where when you ask me about reconciliation and its possibility, I don't first turn to pages in the Bible that give us the example. I turn to pages in my life where I have seen God work and take abandonment and fuse it together to be a stronger bond than it should be possible. I'm not telling you that that will happen for you, but it can. And whatever happens, giving it over to God will allow you to grow in your relationship with Him past where you are today. So if you'd like to give up that burden, I'm inviting you to symbolize that by prayerfully giving up your marble. Father, I ask that you would help us to take seriously your invitation to come to you when we are weary and heavy laden, when we are burdened and encumbered with pain and wounds and anger. Lord, would you help us to have the faithfulness and strength to bring it to you? And would you bless us with the faithfulness to walk with you after we give it? Lord, thank you for receiving our burdens. Help us to offer them to you. In Jesus' name, amen.